before I read your book, I was thinking of myself as a kind of pagan Christian.
Mm,
I'm trying to find a way like to incorporate both, to
mm,
allow for, the kind of
mm,
the polytheism
mm,
that's come to me through these strange experiences I've had working with different plant medicines and through my yoga
mm,
practice and kind of
mm,
just being naturally open as a mystic type my
mm,
whole life. So always
mm,
having very vivid, strange and wild dreams and things like that.
mm, mm,
But then there's this figure of Christ who would come to
mm,
me in some of my visions, and I'm like,
mm,
God, I don't want to deal with
mm.
you, man. Like, there's so much
Yeah,
kind of stigma
yeah,
due to the past 2,000 years of
yeah,
Catholicism and Orthodoxy. Uh,
yeah,
so really, for me, it's been about trying to get down to the kind of how I've been thinking about it is like the pre-Christian Christ.
yeah.
Like, who is that figure outside of the church and all of the
Mm,
dogmas and everything
mm,
else? And something very alive there still,
mm,
which is
mm.
kind of mysterious and strange to me.
Yeah, I found it very helpful to separate the figures of Christ and Jesus. It's something that Orthodox Christians cannot do because the creeds were all about bridging the gap and particularly the very early, well, the creeds of the third and fourth century, they were about sort of cementing Jesus and Christ, fully God, fully man, and therefore, you cannot prize them apart to see what each one means. But I think when you do that, when look again, I was given the freedom to do that. So when you look first of all at the figure of Jesus pre-Christianity, and I think you can get glimpses of him. Um, Again, it was quite a surprise to some of the pagan readers of my book and Christian readers of the book to learn about the quest for the historical Jesus, which has been going on for hundreds of years, but it's a movement largely within sort of thinking Christianity to try to unpick the Christian layers or the church's layers on the Jesus image to get back to who the original person might have been. And it's all very vague. It's all might have been rather than was, because we can't really know anything. But the current scholarship I find really exciting because whereas a couple of hundred years ago, the sort of person they ended up with after this digging away was not a very it's quite a sort of bland sort of figure. The person that they're now talking about is almost like a shaman. It's a Jewish man steeped in his own culture and religion, but somehow on the edge of that and trying to awaken them to something that is deeply within them and present in the places where they've maybe not expected to find God or the divine. Hence, he's such a radical figure. And he's sort of while on the one hand being fully within his culture, he's also countercultural, and ends up obviously paying the price by execution. This is a real figure. Now, this is all what they call the pre-Easter Jesus or the pre-Easter Christ, and you can see glimpses of it, particularly in Mark's gospel and the earlier writings. It's not so prevalent in John because John is a very late gospel and it's very much more Christ centered. Um, and then, so if you put that on one side and then look at the Jesus Christ, which is sort of, I think, that what I see as the second person of the Jesus Trinity, um, which is the when you start applying Christ language to Jesus, I think you have to realize that that's come later because Jesus wouldn't have used that terminology for himself. So that's the church in the future, looking back at the story of Jesus and trying to make sense of it and applying the term Christ and making Jesus Christ to me is perfectly fine as long as it's seen in a sort of symbolic way. What happens with that Jesus Christ figure is it becomes totally literalized, and then the things that that person says are made very literal and very exclusive. So when Jesus Christ says in John's gospel, I am the way, the truth, and the life, no one comes to the Father but by me, suddenly that's seen as therefore only Christians are saved. And that's where it gets very difficult with interfaith dialogue, or with dialogue with pagans or whatever. So I can't possibly go there. That isn't the Jesus of history would never have said such a thing. So I want to know how we hold on to those kind of statements. And I think you can, when you take that even further and you start looking at Christ as a metaphor. And plenty of well-known Christian authors, Matthew Fox, Richard Rohr, and others have talked about cosmic Christ, which is this idea that what was in Jesus, or the Christ element in Jesus, is a microcosm for what is in all people and in all things. And then we're starting to get into the language that pagans would use.